Good afternoon and welcome to the Return Homestead. My name is Mike and my wife Marty and I homestead 50 acres in southeastern Kentucky. Today we are back in our 2001 Fleetwood. We are in the guest bathroom just off of the back door, and we've been working on getting a vanity put together here in the bathroom. Now on the last video we constructed the box underneath, so the framing is all in place for the vanity. We still need to get some shelving down at the bottom, but we also need to get this countertop put together, and this piece of wood is not square. It's not ready. I've got to figure out how to get this thing squared up and ready to go on here for the vanity top. So just looking at this piece of butcher block, you can see the problem we're going to have. This was the cutout for the kitchen sink, and that was cut freehand with a jigsaw. So it is not square. So we've got to get this piece of butcher block squared up so that it will fit into the space and square up with the walls. And we've also got to deal with these corners where we tried to round them off as we were cutting it out for the sink. Now, normally you would use something like a track saw, or even a crosscut sled on a table saw might be helpful. I don't have a crosscut sled built, and we don't have a track saw, so I've got to figure out how I'm going to use basic hand tools to get this piece of butcher block squared up. So the problem is we have this large slab of butcher block that is not square on any of its sides. They aren't even straight. So it's just a crooked mess at the moment. We've got a hole where we cut out to put our jigsaw in, and there's no way to really turn this into a countertop in its current condition. We've got to get it squared up, which means we need to start with a straight edge. But none of the edges on this are currently straight. So how do you get a straight edge when you don't have a track saw? Well, if you've got some scrap lumber laying around, it's not that difficult to build a track saw. All we need is a piece of plywood that is sufficiently long to cover the piece and a scrap of 2x4. What we'll do is screw off this 2x4 to the plywood, and that's just step one. Step two is going to be to put the skill saw up against the 2x4 and then cut this piece of plywood so that it's only wide enough to accommodate the deck of the saw. That's going to give us a straight edge that we can work with, that we can line up along one of the lines in the butcher block, and then we're going to be able to rip that off and get a nice straight edge as a result. I think this is the straightest portion of this 2x4, so that's the edge we want facing out. All we're going to do is screw this off. Stick some other blocks under here to make sure everything stays nice and level. All we need to do is screw off this piece of plywood to the back of this 2x4 to get our cut rail, whatever you want to call it, put together. But this is all just scrap wood that we're using to get this straight edge put together.
Those don't go into my top, right?
Sure. just want to get enough screws in here that I have a nice tight connect between the two pieces. So we got a nice tight connect between the plywood and the 2x4. Now all I have to do is run the skill saw down this edge of the plywood, and that'll cut this off to width so that we get a nice straight edge to work from based on the 2x4. And the 2x4 becomes our rip fence, or our fence that we place the skill saw against, so that we get a nice straight edge when we're done. So now all we have to do is line this up along one of the edges of the butcher block. Now the nice thing about butcher block is that these are chunks of wood that have been glued up together, so there's always nice straight lines that you can follow. And I'm just going to lay our fence along one of these lines, and that's going to give us a nice straight edge to cut along. All I have to do is place the skill saw up against the 2x4, run right back down the same edge we just cut, and that'll allow me to cut all the way through the butcher block. I did just check the depth of the blade. It's barely going to make it through the bottom of the butcher block, but that will get the job done. If you have the opportunity and other material, you might go with a little bit narrower piece of plywood, and that'll give you a little bit better depth on your saw. I'm just going to line this up, get set up for a cut here.
Oh, this weather's awesome.
It's beautiful, huh?
Mm-hmm. You'd never know we had such horrible weather. It's cool. It's not humid.
So what I'm doing now is just trying to get a clamp set that'll hold this fence in place. Get a clamp on each end, nice and tight. Keeping in mind that this butcher block could end up being the top surface of my countertop, so I've got a piece of scrap wood in here just to make sure we don't put any dents in the butcher block. One on the other side. If you're working with sawhorses the way that I am, be kind to your sawhorses. Remember that they're going to be underneath your cut. Slide them back out of the way so you don't end up trimming your sawhorses as well as the wood. Now all we have to do is line up the saw and run it right along the edge of the 2x4, cutting all the way through the butcher block. Let's see if we can do that. Not quite. All right, so we didn't quite cut all the way through. I thought this was going to work, but obviously a 1/2-inch plywood would have been a much better choice for the deck on our rip fence. So the fence did work perfectly. So we've got a nice straight line cut in the butcher block now, which was part of the objective. We do need to get this face off of the butcher block so that we can then begin squaring up the rest of the wood. To do that, the best way I can see right now is to just freehand the saw back through here without the fence in the way. That's going to give me a complete cut all the way through. And if it's a little bit jagged on that bottom edge where my hand may move while I'm doing the free cut, we can always sand that off or make sure that that's in places on the vanity where it doesn't show. So we got that ripped off. This is all nice and clean now, ready to start sanding, but we still need to square off the other sides. But now we have a reference side where we've got a straight edge to work from. So it should be pretty easy to square up the rest of this butcher block. So here's the setup for the second cut. I'm just using a speed square. I did stick another block of wood in here so that my speed square was not referencing off of the plywood, which is definitely not straight. I wanted to use the 2x4 is my straight edge, and since we're referencing off of the 2x4, I want to make sure that I'm pushing the speed square against the 2x4. So just stuck another chunk of wood in there that's square, and so we're nice and square off of the straight edge that we just cut, and so that should get us square on this corner and give us a nice straight edge down this side. The other thing I did is I went ahead and found a piece of 1/2-inch sheeting, so we cut a new platform for our fence so that we do have the right depth now. We should be able to cut all the way through on the first go. That's good.
Okay. You're cutting that much off?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've got this rounded corner to deal with.
Gotcha.
So I'm just cutting it off. That's still going to give me the 30 inches I needed.
Okay.
Let's move this over a little bit. Have enough room to do a sawhorse.
Okay.
We all still square? Nothing
I
made?
guess.
Yeah, that's good.
It is so nice today. It's like Nevada weather. You'd never know we had a horrible tornado go through here.
Right?
What was it, a day ago?
It's 2 days ago now.
2 days ago?
So, yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful day today. Marty and I spent the best portion of the morning out running around looking at some of the countryside. It was just that nice a day. And we were kind of, I don't know, it's almost surreal because we had tornadic weather. If you guys saw, there was a tornado that ran through London, Kentucky. And that was not too far from us. We spent a good part of that night out in the storm shelter. We were glad to have that storm shelter there, thank you, Lord. Rather a devastating event for our neighbors.
Please keep them in prayer.
Absolutely. There's a lot of folks that are still digging out from that mess. But it's a beautiful day today. Unfortunately, more storms on the way this evening. We're taking advantage of what we got today.
Yeah.
I think we're ready for that cut.
Okay.
As soon as I find the saw. Now we got 3 edges that are squared up. And all we have is this one last long edge. And we'll have a nice square piece of butcher block to work with for the countertop.
Here.
Looks good. So we're trying to maintain as much width as we can in the countertop. So this is a really thin cut. It should get us all nicely squared up. And just like that, we've got a nice square piece of butcher block ready to build a vanity out of. Now we do still need to pay a little bit of attention to this. It's not exactly ready to be installed. I'm going to take a sander to it, make sure we've gotten the edges sanded nice and smooth. We'll also double check this top surface, make sure that it's clean and smooth. Then we'll put a coat of Rubio Monocoat on probably the top and bottom, since this is going to be a bathroom vanity. It's likely to get wet, so we want to make sure we treat the wood completely. Once we've got that dried and it's ready to install, just some simple L brackets underneath the framing will allow us to connect this to the framing and make sure we got a good tight connect between the frame and the countertop. After that, it's a matter of figuring out where the sink goes. We're putting a vessel sink on top of this, so we'll have to drill a hole through the center for our sink drain to go through. And then we'll also need 1 or possibly 2 holes, maybe even 3, depending on the faucet setup that we get to go behind the vessel sink. So this is the beginnings of it, though, just getting this thing squared up and getting it ready to go and be installed. Let's see what it looks like. So we now have a nice square piece of butcher block. I do see a few small places. I'm going to have to work with the sander to get this cleaned up a little bit, and then we'll get it treated before we install the thing. We do appreciate you joining us on the Return Homestead today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please take a moment to do so. While you've got that window open, hit the thumbs up icon. That's going to let the algorithm know you enjoyed the video, and they'll share it out with more people. And we'll see you next time.